Ladies and gentlemen, what you can't tell is that this seemingly disconnected series of images contains a secret message. Yes, that's right. We're trying to get you to have sex with each other.
There sure are a lot of people trying to get a lot of messages out there. And what if you want to get your message across and differentiate it from all the rest, but you feel that just slapping a pair of tits on the billboard is a little tired? Well, you could always try Subliminal Messages. And conveniently, that's what I'm going to review in this week's episode. A favorite plot device of conspiracy theorists, subliminal messages are, of course, messages which are delivered directly to your subconscious without your conscious mind being aware. What makes them even more insidious is they're pretty much always embedded within a much more palatable message. I mean, you generally don't get white supremacist rock bands releasing records that, when played backwards, give you a great recipe for chocolate and vanilla ice cream cake. Naturally, we here at In a Handful of Minutes are far too ethically minded to attempt to manipulate you in such a crass shit. Okay, you're not supposed to see that. That's only supposed to flicker for every 1/3000th of a second in a minute, or we could just take that down any minute now. We can just leave it hanging. That's cool. Just leave it up there forever. Don't take that image down. That's for sure. Yep. Anyways, it doesn't really matter because subliminal messages are just not as effective as we've all, come to think. The fact of the matter is, you can blame this entirely on James Vickery, a fellow who in the 1950s set off the whole sequence of events that led us to thinking that flashing "buy this" during a commercial would actually make you want to buy something. That he's also responsible indirectly for the 1980s heavy metal record played backwards phenomenon, and also, of course, people looking for secret messages being given to teenagers in Disney films of the early 1990s. Not to mention that friggin' image. Would you stop putting that up? I gotta get a new editor. But yes, James Vickery was, of course, not a scientist. He was an ad man who coined the term subliminal advertising when in the 50s he performed his experiments, which he claimed had incredible effects on the purchasing habits of those involved. But when scientists, performed the experiments themselves, there was no effect. When called on this, James's defense was to say, whoops, sorry, I didn't actually perform any experiments. I just told a bunch of big fat lies. Nonetheless, conspiracy theorists and other alarmists really latched on to the idea, which led to the production of such books as Vance Packard's The Hidden Persuaders. This in turn got the public all riled up and put a lot of pressure on governments to ban it. So, of course, eventually you got the UK, America, Australia, and after a little bit of a debate, Canada banning subliminal messages, which is a little odd because at the time there was no real serious evidence that subliminal messages did anything. Thus, this ban was somewhat akin to banning crushed up unicorn hooves being snorted for recreation. The audio equivalent is almost as ineffective. You see, there were many large court cases during the early 80s through the early 90s wherein heavy metal bands were investigated upon claims that their songs contained hidden tracks, which when played would put harmful messages in the minds of the listeners. However, despite all these investigations and hours and hours of lawyers and police looking into the thing, the only thing they actually found any evidence of was fundamentalist Christian preachers trying to find more media attention. Coming back to subliminal images, though, further experiments were done later which had nothing to do with James Vickery's shenanigans, and these proved that you can actually get some results from subliminal images, just not the kind that stories have trained us to expect. Take, for example, tests done by a Dr. Johann Karaman. His test results suggest that while you can't influence the goals of a person, you can influence how they achieve them. Thus, you cannot make them desire soda, but you could get your test subjects that were already thirsty to choose to quench their thirst with a specific beverage. However, a test by a Dr. Burns suggested almost the exact opposite, where his flashing the word beef didn't make any of his subjects prefer a beef sandwich when offered 5 meal choices, but it did make most of them hungrier. The one consistency between tests seems to be that you have to stick to a very simple image or phrase. Anything too complex will simply not be picked up. So basically it's a technique that's unpredictable, is illegal in almost every nation, and if you're caught using it will probably cause a big public outcry. In the end, I think I'm going to have to weigh against the use of subliminal messaging, since you pretty much have to... Okay, we get it. That doesn't even make any... That's not a message. That's nothing. Okay, see you guys next week. Bye.
Some of our audience at home may think that image of Oliver was Photoshopped. But have you considered that perhaps it was not Photoshopped? Many people throughout the ages have lived their lives without ever questioning figures of authority, only to find out the very people they trusted were their worst enemies. Is that how you want to be remembered?